About 2 years ago, there were many well-known instructors who said that, probably those who speak English as a second language or as a foreign language, they will probably never have band 9 in their writing. And fast forward 2024, and there is band 9 in writing in Uzbekistan.
It was all nines except for task response.
Would you say that there are some questions, there are some answers that examiners like seeing in essays based on certain topics? And
Oh yeah, that's a good question, but I will say that there are certain templates that examiners don't like in particular.
what would you say about students judging teachers based on their IELTS scores? Would you agree that IELTS is an indication of how good a teacher is?
It's understandable to me because that's one of the easiest ways to assess the teacher's qualification as quickly as possible.
How did you start, or when did you start learning English?
I started learning English in 2015, I believe that was.
Do you have any plans of taking your son into English direction in the future?
I will definitely speak English in family.
And do you think that students can actually learn anything from Instagram Reels about IELTS?
IELTS or social media learning is more of an entertainment tool rather than an effective tool for teaching or learning anything.
Assalamualaikum everybody, this is IELTS School Podcast episode number 2, and today in the studio with us is Laziz Atabaev, a niner and the only band 9 in writing, a feat that was deemed impossible a couple of years ago.
Assalamualaikum everyone, IELTS community, and thank you for having me. It's really a pleasure to meet you.
All right, Laziz, let's start by talking about writing band 9, as I've mentioned. As I said, about 2 years ago, there were many well-known instructors who said that probably those who speak English as a second language or as a foreign language, they will probably never have band 9 in their writing. And fast forward 2024, and there is band 9 in writing in Uzbekistan. Let's talk about your journey to that. How did that happen?
Well, my journey was, I was actually not planning initially to get the 9 because I would also used to think that was impossible, or at least in a way that I would get one in my case. And I was actually going after 9 as everyone else in this sphere. And I was actually setting my sights on 8.5 in writing and 8.5 in speaking. That was my luckiest or most likely case that I was hoping for.
Yeah, just like any other band 9, it's either speaking 9 and writing 8, or it's 8.5 in both. But I think that writing band 9, that's honestly a very impressive feat. Did you get a score breakdown for that?
Yeah, I did. I actually shared it on my channel, and it was all 9s except for task response. Somehow I couldn't really get that to 9. I did have a feeling that would turn out to be an 8. Other than that, all other 7 sub-scores or the criteria were 9s.
Wow, that is. So you had all 9 in task 1 and all 9 in task 2 except for task response.
Task response, exactly.
Wow. So what do you think? What makes it difficult for students to understand what task response is? As an instructor who has taught IELTS for more than 10 years, I still think that I struggle to get a high band in that task response section.
For me, in my case, task response is mostly boils down to the question, the topic that you get, because I am quite interested in certain topics, and I would probably be able to easily get the 9 in task response if I were to have one of those topics, whether it be sports or parenting, for example, something that I'm personally interested in, and have some like general knowledge, and did some extensive reading. But yeah, in my case, that boils down to the topic.
And speaking of topics, I usually tell my students, like, writing is not math where you say 2 plus 2 and the answer is 4 and examiners say this is correct or this is wrong. It's usually about your ideas and how you explain them rather than what you try to explain. Would you say that there are some questions, there are some answers that examiners like seeing in essays based on like certain topics? And
Oh yeah, that's a good question. But I will say that there are certain templates that examiners don't like in particular, and I've heard some examiners talk about these. Like there are some cliche phrase, maybe like linking words, or just in general the structure might be too again cliche, that some examiners, again not all of them, but some of them might find quite repetitive and boring maybe, and this could affect the score.
yeah, are we talking about these phrases where they go like in task 1, for example, after the introduction to start overview, they go overall, it is clear from the given graph that some of the major trends present in the graph are.
It is definitely one of those, because like anything that is going to act unnatural or seem unnatural to the examiner is going to affect the score.
So examiners mostly focused on students' input about the topic rather than like the phrases that they memorized before the test.
Yeah,
right?
and it's quite easy to detect and separate from the rest of the essay.
Especially when examiners read more than 50 essays every day, right? So those students who are learning, who are trying to memorize those long phrases to start the introduction or to start the conclusion. Sometimes I tell my students, in conclusion is enough, and they go like, "But teacher, that doesn't sound cool. Everybody says in conclusion at the end of the essay." And I say, yeah, because that's common. There is a reason why everybody says, because it's correct. And they say, how about things like, having taken every mentioned point into consideration, I would like to deduce that. And I say, that sounds weird. And there is a reason why nobody says that, because that's weird.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you're one of those students who are trying to learn these phrases, as two Band Niners are telling you, please stop doing that. Focus on explaining the content as much as you can. And speaking of grammar, from my experience, I've worked with many teachers. We've collaborated a lot. Even when I am in Olympiad subject competitions as a judge, when I see teachers giving like good scores to essays, those are kind of safe essays. They went for easy grammar and they have fewer mistakes. And some essays went for a more sophisticated grammar structures, which naturally led them to having these errors in their essay. But they get usually like lower score. There is no let's say reward for their effort to use sophisticated grammar. What would you say for IELTS is best? Is it best to go for safe grammar, or should they experiment with different structures?
I actually have a good answer to that question, and this is something that I've always preached to my students. And in terms of lexical resource and grammar, in terms of vocabulary and grammar, I always tell my students to not think about these two criteria, because at the end of the day, these two are going to end up showing whatever your actual abilities are, and whether you prepare or not, it's going to reflect the real score. So you can never fake your lexical resource and grammar. So instead, I would strongly advise to focus on general English first, and once your vocabulary and grammar in general English, that's what we call general English, right, is good enough, like let's say 7, and you can focus entirely and solely on the other two criteria, which are task response and coherence cohesion.
Yeah, that makes sense. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't understand. I think that I don't remember where I've read that, but one of the online instructors, they have this, pinpointed in their website when you enter, and they have IELTS is an English testing format, which you can prepare for within a week if you have the level of English that you've learned improved for years. So yeah, I would definitely agree that general English is more important than learning these tips and strategies. And speaking of grammar again, there is this weird trend among parents and some of the students where they say, my kid needs to learn grammar first for about 6 months, a year, and then they will go to IELTS. What is your 2 cents about that?
Okay, my personal stance on this is that I find it quite amusing, but again, it's not a good thing to do. Certainly, I would never advise anyone to start from grammar for a couple of reasons. But the primary reason is that a student, a learner, or a beginner, in our case, would struggle to find passion in learning. That is one thing that I would personally prioritize when starting learning anything for that matter, but particularly English grammar, because English grammar, pure English grammar, can be quite boring, and no matter how amusing of a teacher you are, how entertaining your classes are, if you only focus on the grammar part, the grammar side, it's going to be quite boring for a student.
But can this grammar be used as this grammar knowledge, however they learn this, can this be used as basis for IELTS prep?
It can be in some cases, but if we're talking about the general population and about most people, I don't think it's relevant for a lot of people. I have a few close friends who started from grammar. They took grammar classes for about a year or so, and then they went straight into IELTS. But they managed it. They did manage the two areas quite well. But that's just an exception, I guess.
And obviously, but my personal opinion is when parents say grammar, what I envisage is these students with these large notebooks where they write down hundreds of rules as if that's the only way of saying things. I try to explain to my students all right, grammar is not about, well, first of all, it's about correct sentence structures, but it's not solely about that. It's also about being able to say one thing in 5 different ways, for example, in 5 different structures, and still have the same meaning. Let's discuss some of the current trends in Uzbekistan and listen to your opinion about that. What do you think about the situation with IELTS in general in Uzbekistan?
Yeah, I think it's a craze. It's a passing craze that everybody seems to be taking advantage of in a positive sense, of course. And it is certainly helping a lot of students to get to open the doors, so to say. And also it's helping a lot of teachers and IELTS instructors to get going into something more meaningful. And I think it's good overall. It's a positive development. Yeah.
And how about what would you say about students judging teachers based on their IELTS scores? Would you agree that IELTS is an indication of how good a teacher is?
Well, certainly not the only factor. That's one of the factors and one of the most common aspects that or requirements that at least parents look for. And it's understandable to me because that's one of the easiest ways to assess the teacher's qualification as quickly as possible. And what's sad about it is that it undermines or it shows how low the value of a degree, like professional degree, is here in Uzbekistan. Yeah.
I don't know how correct that is that what we do, but I would personally take if I had to hire a teacher, to teach general English or IELTS, I would personally choose a teacher with band 7 and good methodology, like interpersonal skills and stuff, over a teacher with, for example, 8.5, but not really able to establish communication with students, because one is, in my mind, good at teaching, likes teaching, loves the job, which is for me the most important thing in a teacher.
Yeah, of course.
And then still can fix the IELTS part. They can still go for that. They can score 8, 8.5, and 9 perhaps. But the other one, they do have decent score in IELTS, but they still have a long way in terms of establishing themselves as an effective teacher. This is how I usually look at that. I would say personally, I don't think that anything changed after I got 9. I'm still the same teacher that I was a month ago. But I think it definitely gives some sort of validity to parents who usually look at IELTS scores and know it's definitely kind of pleasant to feel that you're going to finally have that 9, and now you can be more sure of things you say in the classroom and things you teach and the way you teach them. All right. Let's focus on multi-level. Let me just, kind of add that question into this part. What do you think about multi-level?
So the test is, in my case, in my personal view, is not the best one in terms of how it's organized. I mean, I totally support the idea of having a similar test to IELTS, which is similar to IELTS, run by the state, because it certainly benefits the budget and the community overall. But it has to match the standards. I think the international standards at least, and it would be better if we could invest some money and improve certain aspects of it. And the first thing that comes to mind is the organization, because I've seen this. I've seen how they organize, how they run the tests a couple of times, and I've heard from students who take the test, and they were mostly negative about the experience, not the test itself, but the way it was conducted. Like in the case of IELTS, they always ask for your feedback. Once you've taken the test, they ask you some questions about the experience, and you can give some feedback, and that definitely affects the service. While there is no such thing in the case of multi-level test, and that would be a nice addition. And if our government or anyone in charge would be willing to hear that out, yeah.
So yeah, that is a very good suggestion. Well, if anyone from multi-level organization, anyone from my former colleagues, because I used to do kind of part-time distance job for DTM back in the day. If anyone is watching this video, then I think you guys should be taking notes now. So asking students, students are yes, they've prepared, they don't look at themselves as customers, but for DTM, for BBA currently, they are still customers. So their opinion should interest you guys in a way. Probably, I as far as I remember, IELTS usually sends emails asking about feedbacks, right? And the same kind of initiative could make your test much better. In case you guys are listening. And here's a question, and I would like to have an honest opinion about that. Would you say that multi-level B2 is equal to IELTS 5.5?
In a lot of cases, it might be equal, but I've seen the test myself, and I've seen my students who I would personally assess as B2 level students get a little higher score than they normally would on IELTS. So in terms of the IELTS benchmark, which is in terms of B2 level is only ranges only from 5.5 to 6.5. And in that case, most students who would end up with 51, which is like the lowest benchmark, like the threshold for B2 level in multi-level, end up failing the test or getting the 4.5 maybe. So I think that answering your question, in a lot of cases, the lowest score on multi-level exam would probably equal a score of slightly lower than 5.5, which is a threshold for IELTS B2. So that's what I think. Yeah.
But there is a general like understanding that many students, like when I see them and I say like why would you like to get multi-level, and they say, well, teacher, it's easier. It's easier to get B2 for me than like getting 5.5. And to some extent, I would say it is. And that is why I usually tell my students, like, hey, if you're preparing for like to go to university where you want to specialize in teaching language, or where you specialize in linguistics, for example, why go for easy way? This is your future. Go take IELTS. But if I have students who are planning to go to University of Law or economy and other let's say language related areas, I would say B2, why not get your job done more easily, and then focus on your own sphere. There might be a general idea that getting B2 is easier than scoring 5.5 in IELTS. And there might be some truth in it, but it does not necessarily mean that the student with B2 level of English is like, bad in any way. It's not, there is no, let's say, intention here to undermine what they've achieved. So speaking, I'm going to go back to writing 9 again. So everybody knows what Laziz has done, which is scoring band 9 in writing and in IELTS in like general. But not everybody knows who Laziz is, what he does, how he spends his day. When we heard Laziz Atabaev scored band 9 in writing and overall is also band 9, that was like the tip of the iceberg. But what's at the bottom of the iceberg, I think this podcast serves as a good opportunity to explore that part as well. So let's first talk about your initial steps into English. How did you start, or when did you start learning English?
I started learning English in 2015, I believe that was. And around that time, I was preparing for the IELTS exam, just like everyone else, with my friends, with the goal of getting into a university, which even at that time required B2 level. And we were all preparing for the IELTS exams. And that was the initial spark or interest. At that time, I would never consider teaching English as a line of work, as my future profession.
At the beginning, nobody does.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I've come to conclusion that very few people actually plan to become IELTS instructors. Yes, and at that time, I was considering to, go into finance sphere, because that was something I was personally passionate about at the time, partly because my father and my grandfather, they were both like in this line of work, so they majored in economics. So I was planning to study finance at university, but once I got my first IELTS certificate, I took my test in 2017. That was, and I got my first 7 at that time.
Impressive.
At that time, that was quite an impressive score, and I immediately went into teaching because that was something that would provide me with some pocket money. That was the whole thing about, that's what drove me first into teaching. Yeah, and once I got a taste of what teaching is, I grew to like it, but not to the point where I would again consider going full time, being full time teacher, because I was still dreaming of like career of financial analyst or something of that sort. Yeah, and yeah, you've got a question.
No, I'm just listening.
Yeah, and
I believe it's a long journey.
yeah. That and to make the long story short, I think that initial spark and that initial requirement of your university requirement was the major factor to for me to get going into this sphere and to actually love the language and the whole idea of teaching and etc. Yeah.
Was there anyone who inspired you, like to learn English? I mean, even if you want to do your degree, and English is kind of related to that. Most people would limit themselves by getting like 6 and going into finance, but to score 7 in your first attempt and go all the way up to 9, you have to have a lot of passion about it. So was there anyone behind this passion?
Yeah, certainly. I think the key role was my friends. My friends played the key role in getting that first 7, which took me a lot of time and perseverance to get. And in my case, I was lucky to have people around me who shared the same vision and ambition that I did, or even maybe at some point they had even bigger ideas or bigger goals than me. That certainly helps you, stay or motivates you to, catch up and stay at the same level, or at least try your best to not like fall behind. And that kept me going. Yeah.
The atmosphere that you were in was crucial for your success.
Yes, exactly.
All right. Do you create similar kind of atmosphere among your students now?
Oh yeah, I understand the importance of having people around you who could influence you, because like not everyone can actually self study or self motivate themselves to keep going, because sometimes IELTS preparation in particular can be quite stressful, and the journey can be quite long and hard at times, and you would really love to have someone there for you, to be there for you. And yeah, I try my best to instill that should I say mindset into my students. I talk about how important to have people to maybe practice some English, some speaking maybe together, and I encourage them to get together regularly and practice some of the activities, IELTS activities, together, because that would play its part later in their preparation. Yeah.
Yeah, discussions with peers are indeed very important, right?
Yeah.
And nowadays, having scored 9 a while ago, what is your typical day like? How do you, let's say, balance working with students, but at the same time spending time for yourself, like improving your English or doing any other thing?
Yeah, I'm still after the 9 in speaking, and I would love to polish my speaking skills a little bit more to finally get that to secure that 9 in speaking. But managing, work and life and balancing work and life can be quite hard sometimes, as you may understand. And since I'm a family man with a young boy growing up, it's extremely hard to you know to I guess manage time. And I try my best to be as family oriented, I guess, as possible. I try to spend as much quality time with my family as possible. And yeah,
So you're married,
I am married. Yeah.
and do you have kids?
Yeah, one boy is just 6 months old.
Oh,
Yeah.
cool. Do you have any plans of taking your son into English direction in the future?
I will definitely speak English in family, and I would love him to be able to understand the English language and do something about it. But definitely not go into teaching, because I understand how stressful it can be, and probably help him get better at the, like, language skills, but still prefer him to pick something else, I guess.
Why though?
I mean, there are so many fascinating things you can do about, like, in this life that I personally wish I could. And teaching is as rewarding as it is. I still think that there are so many ways you can definitely explore the world. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, sometimes I think I'm gonna regret when I'm like 45 or close to 50. What if I regret all these, like, most energetic years that I've spent, kind of imprisoned, not really imprisoned, maybe saying imprisoned is too much of an exaggeration, but let's say confined within these four walls, almost about like 8 to 10 hours every day, when I could be doing something else, traveling the world, exploring the places, and just, like, working on finding out my passions. I sometimes feel a little bit depressed about teaching. Why am I spending my best years within these four walls? But then I think maybe this is my mission. Maybe my mission is to serve students, to help them, reach their potential, to help the community in the way I can, like this probably, and that kind of comforts me. But let me first reach 45 or 50, and we'll see how I feel then. So far, I feel like, as much as I felt really bad about teaching at first, now I think my attitude towards teaching as a job changed. My views about teaching in general changed into a more positive direction, I would say. I guess we could switch to talking about teaching IELTS. Biggest challenges that IELTS instructors around Uzbekistan face.
Not really sure where to start. Like,
There are many. Right?
yeah, certainly. The job is stressful. That should be, like, obvious and self-explanatory. But other than the nature of work, I guess, the fact that it's stressful and time-consuming, I think that the fact that you have to deal with different people, different students, different personalities and attitudes, and different parents also, it can be quite challenging at times, because not everyone has the same opinion on your IELTS qualification, or your IELTS skills or teaching skills. And some people or some parents might be a little more judgmental or critical about your work style or teaching style, and some students might be a little more demanding in terms of what your classes should look like. And these things can get in the way of teaching and being yourself. So, for example, I'm not sure how big of a problem that is for other teachers out there, but in my case, the fact that I look very young has always been a tremendous obstacle in getting the necessary contact, the first impression with parents and students. Because on like when you first see me, you wouldn't expect me to be 25 and to be a professional IELTS teacher, and that certainly played its part a little bit negatively. In my case, was a challenge. Yeah.
Well, at 25, Laziz, you don't look young. You are young.
I mean, yeah, but like, yeah,
yeah,
I definitely look a lot younger than 25, I guess.
Age is just a
Yeah.
number, and the accomplishments you have speak for themselves. Indeed, I have some of my students who are like 19, 20 years old, and sometimes I ask them to, conduct extra classes with some of their peers. And when I look at the way they're working with students and they're teaching, I say like, oh God, this student found a better way of teaching these kids than I do. I couldn't
Yeah.
think of that. So
Yeah,
age is just a number, but unfortunately in our society sometimes they, may look at your age and say, well, are you like good enough at this at all?
Yeah, that's what I was initially going for. Yeah, like the perception of our population, or at least older generation, should I say older generation who would still have conservative views
Yeah.
about the way you look, about the way you dress and talk, and again the age thing. Yeah.
Yeah, indeed. Like there are some situations. There were some situations in the past when I also, was half of what I'm right now. I mean, like I put on some weight ever since I started teaching. But at the beginning of my career, there were some parents who were like, "Are you a student or are you a teacher? We
Yeah.
don't really know the difference." But most of those parents, I would say, ended up thanking me for the result that their children got.
Yeah.
So I guess it takes time a little bit. I would love to look and remain as young as I could, but I guess that's part of the job. Well, with the advent of AI now,
Yeah.
who is getting more of a benefit in their preparation in education in general? Would you say it's teachers, specifically of IELTS, or students who are preparing for IELTS?
Yeah, AI has definitely made a big difference in the way I teach, the way teachers prepare for the lessons, but also in the way that students can reach their goals. And as I see it, as I like to put it in simple terms, I think AI is just a teaching assistant, a free teaching assistant, both for the teachers and the students. And I think we can benefit a lot from like AI, and I think that not enough there's not enough knowledge, still not enough knowledge about what AI is capable of, and not everyone uses it in best way possible. Like I can see students just asking it, the chat GPT, for example, to assess their work instead of actually prompting or thinking about the prompt more carefully, and maybe ask for specific, things like whether my ideas are relevant or not, which is of course a lot more effective. Yeah. And there's still a lot to learn about AI, and I wish I could see some AI courses or classes in our traditional classroom, like schools. Yeah, school curriculum.
Yeah, that would be something new though. But I guess there is some effort being put into that. In his most recent address to the young, Mr. President himself told that we kind of needed a whole university campus that would teach how to work with AI. So I guess that it's being taken seriously at a governmental level, and maybe, perhaps, in the future, as you said, we might have these schools where AI is taught. What I don't like about AI is sometimes I teach a writing topic to a group for the first time, and this is their first exposure to this. and they come back with band 9 essay, as you said. Instead of some students misuse that, kind of take advantage of what AI can do. Instead of giving the prompts that would help them improve themselves, they just go for, write an essay for me. And then they get that essay and they bring it, which makes my job hard, which makes the job a little bit harder for like all the teachers around. Here's an important question, and I think that you've probably tried this a lot. I will make this question like two-part, all right? So first of all, can AI assess students' essays? And what can students do to get a more accurate assessment of their essays?
As of today, like February 2025, I think current tools like ChatGPT and probably DeepSeek are not capable of proper evaluation of IELTS academic essays as closely as possible to what's considered to be a proper assessment by IELTS standards. And in that sense, no. But it can be as close and as good of and as effective of a tool to, maybe not provide a score, but at least to provide some feedback to students. And in that sense, in that regard, I think students can gain a lot of insights into their writing by asking feedback about their work instead of a score. Yeah.
So ChatGPT is better at giving feedback than giving a definite score. Right?
Yes.
All right. Another point that students are obsessed with these days is social media, like Instagram particularly. On Instagram, there's so many IELTS instructors. There's so many pseudo instructors with fake IELTS bad scores, telling students what to do, what not to do, like 2 don'ts, 2 do's. I'm going to explain you this in 20 seconds. I'm going to explain you that in 1 minute. What is the impact of this on students? And do you think that students can actually learn anything from Instagram Reels about IELTS?
Well, I view social media IELTS or social media learning as more of an entertainment tool rather than an effective tool for teaching or learning anything. So in that regard, I don't think that it would be a good idea to rely on it entirely. I mean, of course, there might be a few video clips that can like provide something interesting, something to actually think about, some food for thought. But on the whole, I think relying on social media or the reels, the clips, is not a very good idea, because at the end of the day, learning, the real learning happens to be in books and traditional teaching methods still. And the earlier the students realize that, the better it is for them, I guess.
Yeah, but students have this, prime obsession. And I think this gives the illusion to students that they can learn stuff in 20 seconds or 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Maybe that accounts for the popularity of social media. And have you ever thought about blogging? Because if you did, you would have a lot of people following you.
I have thought about blogging, particularly after we shot some videos with Alex. Are you familiar with IELTS Alex?
Is it examiner from British Council?
No, not the examiner. What? The instructor. IELTS. IELTS Alex, native speaker. As you would probably know him. He's based in Tashkent. Yeah, so he came here a few months ago, and we shot some videos, some content. And after that, he gave me some ideas about whether I or not I should go into blogging and filming of what I do. And I've always been quite distant from from all these like latest trends, which would include making content and doing it online. Yeah, but yeah, I have considered it.
And what kind of content would you make if you decided to do so?
I think the easiest one would be to just make a few, to shoot a few clips from my classes, from my actual offline classes, and clip them the most interesting parts into a video or a few video clips and post them on Instagram, for example. That could reach out to a greater audience and probably benefit in some way, and also like attract more students. Yeah, that could be a thing.
Yeah, most of the teacher bloggers or blogger teachers. Again, this is something that I usually use these words to differentiate bloggers from teachers and teachers from bloggers, because teacher bloggers are like primarily teachers and they're kind of do blogging whenever they can, and I call like blogger teachers because they are bloggers. They're not really teachers, but they pretend to be teachers. So most of these blogger teachers, rather than teacher bloggers, they run these online reels in order to attract more students for their online courses. And what would you say about the state of online courses to learn English or to prepare for IELTS? Would you recommend that based on what we have now in 2025?
Yeah, I've always been a fan of offline teaching rather than online, because I've experienced what online education is like back when we had COVID lockdowns. So it was a terrible experience for me in my case, and from what I heard from a lot of people, the whole idea of online education probably at this point is still not as effective as it could be on paper. So yeah, I would always choose offline teaching and offline learning rather than online. And I think the current state of online education, particularly IELTS, is still very like fresh and not very organized. And I have tried conducting some online lessons, focusing particularly on writing part, but like it didn't really the experience wasn't the same as in the case of offline. And I think that's primarily because in a real classroom setting, you would have your audience directly looking at you and engaged with you, and you would have direct and immediate feedback. Whereas in the case of online teaching, it's a little distant and it feels weird and unnatural. So in my case, that was an important difference, and yeah.
Yeah, I also think that learning happens when you truly communicate with the student. But I would at the same time say that for some things, online courses are also kind of helping out. Let's say a student is struggling with writing, and as you said, they could take your course and learn some of the things that they couldn't get from their main teacher and in a classroom, for example. But totally relying on online classes. Unfortunately, more than genuine knowledge, I've seen a lot of marketing there in Uzbekistan.
Yeah.
Especially with people claiming to help their students increase their overall band score by 2, by 1.5 within 1 month, which is impossible in many cases. And in my mind, these online courses, the majority of online courses that are offered in Uzbekistan now are just taking advantage of the trend, taking advantage of the laziness of students. I may be wrong there, but this is what my stance is now about this.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, definitely.
And then there were people like who claimed to teach the whole sector of English, like grammar, within an hour and a half. So when you see those people, on the main channels of television, and then you go like, it felt like we took a step backwards in terms of online teaching, then forward.
I think that happens. Yeah, sorry to interrupt. I think that happens mainly because the problem is that we don't have the enough ability to filter information that we have on social media platforms, and we just take things as a without the grain of salt, I guess, criticism.
That was what I was going to ask you about. Like, what can students do? The viewers in this case, right? I personally don't think students are out there on Instagram. Like, I mean, true students are out there on Instagram, scrolling through the screen. Most of them are probably in libraries, in their rooms, doing stuff with the book. And how can those users, what can they do to filter the information? What information to receive, accept, and what to skip better?
Well, I think that quitting social media platforms would be a good way to start, because the way algorithms, particularly Instagram algorithms, work is that you would be exposed to as much viral content as possible rather than the actual informative content, and the viralness doesn't always equal the quality
right,
of the content. And in a lot of cases these two factors are not interconnected, and so the best thing you can do is just probably quit social media altogether. That's the best filter you can have.
I mean, like, for many students it may be impossible right now to do that. But I totally agree with you. I think that real learning starts when they decide to get rid of social media, or at least get rid of, not in a sense like delete and don't use, but don't use it as an educational tool.
Yeah, probably.
Maybe you have an Instagram account where you post a couple of pictures every month or so, but relying on social media as an educational platform is probably wrong.
I guess in that sense, we were lucky to not have any social media at the time. That played its part. Like the limitations that we had in terms of the environment and opportunities definitely played its part.
All right. Now, to wrap things up, if you could just give one piece of advice to students in Uzbekistan who are learning English for different purposes, what would that be?
I think I would love to, mention one common problem and give advice coming from that. Is that today I see a lot of students take their IELTS exams, get their scores, and just seem to, neglect or just ignore learning the English language after that. Like once they've settled with the exam, they no longer seem to care about the language itself, about learning, about growing in general, as if the exam or the certificate was like their final goal, which in my opinion is not. It's just a tool or probably an opportunity to, as an evidence to show that you understand the language, or you have certain skills at certain level. But the learning part, the growing part should continue for the rest of your life, I guess. And even in my case, I still work on myself, on my skills, and I still learn a lot about the language in my daily life. And that's what I would strongly advise a lot of students out there who may be about to take the test, or may have already taken the test, and to not give up on learning, particularly the language, once they've taken the test.
I also sometimes tell my students that if they keep thinking about a specific score or getting this piece of paper, they will overstress themselves. I say like, all right, we know what the destination is, but try to enjoy the ride. Try to enjoy the journey to that, right? Otherwise, it's difficult to enjoy once you get to the destination. IELTS School podcastining ikkinchi epizodi o'z yakuniga yetdi. Qaysidir savollaringizga javob ola olmagan bo'lsangiz, обязательно uni kommentariyada yozib qoldiring. Eng yaxshi, eng o'rinli berilgan savolga har doimgidek IELTS School jamoasi nomidan surpriz tayyorlab qo'yganmiz. Undan tashqari, yana kelajakda qiziqarli podkastlardan quruq qolib ketmasligi uchun hozirdan subscribe, like, share qilib qo'ying. Keyingi epizodlarda sizni yana intizorlik bilan kutib qolamiz. Ungacha xayr.